I said before that, in my opinion, airships are the most difficult aircraft to fly correctly. And what I mean by that is, the ideal situation is to go from point A to point B, or fly from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, depending on what our mission was, whether it be a golf match and we didn't go anywhere. We just left the airport, went out to the golf course and came back late in the day. Or we were transiting cross country and we went from LA to Phoenix or something like that. The goal is to make your landing at a controllable weight without having to drop ballast. And a controllable weight meaning we want to, in the big British ships I flew mostly, I wanted to be about 50 kilos heavy. And that was a really controllable weight for most wind conditions and everything else. But to be there after that period of time in all sorts of weather conditions that sometimes don't go according to forecast, you've got to consider a lot of parameters, a lot of possibilities that you just take for granted in an airplane, or they're easy to calculate at least in an airplane or a helicopter. So the sun on the side of an envelope, meaning the airship, will heat the helium up much quicker than the outside air or the surrounding air. So the difference in the helium temperature and the outside air temperature is what we call superheat. And superheat, because it's warmer, the helium is expanded and the temperature is different, and it provides a considerable amount of additional lift that may disappear if all of a sudden we get a solid cloud cover and we don't have the bright sunshine, and we'll lose a good part of our superheat. Or after the sun goes down, we'll lose all our superheat. So we got to calculate, we're going to take off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to fly a Monday Night Football up at Meadowlands up in New Jersey. So we're going to fly during the last part of the heat of the day. It's sunny, but we're not going to land till 3 hours after sunset. And you've got to calculate the lift you have now, what you're not going to have when you land, what the time is, what the winds are, because you're going to carry X number of RPM and power, which will burn fuel at a certain rate per hour. And when we burn fuel, we become lighter by that much of fuel burn. And so all these considerations, and again, the weather may work and the weather may not work. It may be windier, you got to carry more power, you're going to burn more fuel, you get lighter quicker. From the time you get on the airship and even before you come off the mast, you got to make sure that your aerostatic trim is where you want it to be, and then you back off the mast and hopefully that's correct, and then you lift off eventually and you get on your, say you're doing a cross country. What I found fascinating, and remember this covers the entire United States with the exception of the higher elevations around the Rocky Mountains and some of the Allegheny Mountains. But I've been across the United States from East Coast to West Coast a number of times, up and down the East Coast, the Mississippi Valley, the West Coast, is that you're traveling at about an average of 35 miles an hour. And people say 35 miles an hour or 35 knots, which is the real aviation way to talk. And I go, look, at that speed, what difference does it make? So we go slow and we go low. And my left arm was strong because I would reach out and wave to everybody I could, because they would go, wow, he's waving at me, Generally, we're below 1,000 feet. You got to be 1,000 feet above structures, person, vessel, or structures, the FAA writes it. And that's over a populated area, a city or community or whatever. However, you can be 500 feet from person, vessel, or structure out in the open in the unpopulated area. And depending on the winds, if we're bucking a headwind, we probably are going to be pretty low, because the lower you get, the less effect you have of the wind generally. If the winds are nominal or sideways, well, it doesn't make any difference. If we got a tailwind, we might jump up a little bit and go a little faster. But the windscreens in the British ships are the largest single-piece windshields of any certified aircraft in the world. They are tremendous. They come all the way around, and you have a view of the world that it's a magic carpet ride. It's unbelievable. I mean, if I can only play back what I've had the opportunity to see over the years, it's just unbelievable. I do have some good video of just like, for example, traveling up the Mississippi River. I got some great video that I took. As we fly, usually there's two pilots. One guy, you fly for an hour and then you take a break and go to sleep, read a book, or whatever you want, eat your lunch, and let the other guy fly for an hour. And we were heading up to St. Paul, Minneapolis, heading up the Mississippi in an area where the river's fairly wide and there were islands, and it was a gorgeous day. There wasn't any wind, and my buddy was flying, and he decided to fly real low, and I had a video camera, and I'm hanging out the right side window looking down, and you could see the reflection, not the shadow, but the reflection of the blimp against the calm water. And I said to him, I said, what's the chance of making those nose lines, which are hanging down, and they are as long that they won't reach the propellers or the landing gear, but that's what we use for landing for the crew to stabilize. And it's not uncommon that we drag the nose lines in the water just to show people how good a pilot we are, you know. And so I'm filming the reflection, and you can see the end of the nose line, and I'll put this image up online. And you can see, then one is just barely shorter than the other, and they start hitting the water, and they start dancing. And you got to see it to understand it. And then I lifted up and looked around as we went between these islands that were not too far apart from each other, and all I could think of is, I sure hope there's no power lines cutting across here. No, the average cross-country day would be 300 to 350 miles, depending on the weather, winds, and highways. Because remember, as we're going to point B in the blimp, we got a crew of 20-some guys, trucks, buses, support vehicles. They got to be there, and of course, my car is it's amongst a convoy, and I want it there because I got my luggage in it. And for years, I had my dog in it if he wasn't flying with me. In fact, there's a school in Los Angeles. I don't know how it worked out. I haven't communicated with them. It begins with an R. It's RMS. Whatever the town is, middle school. And on 2 different occasions, in 2 different airships, different airship each occasion, years apart, I'd fly over this community, and there was this middle school, and twice this happened, and whoever was the athletic leader for that school would get their kids to lay out on the grass. And the first time it said, it just said RMS with kids. I circled and I took some pictures. Then the second time I did it, I remember it was 1994, and I was flying the Pink Floyd Division Bell blimp to promote the upcoming world tour, which is a whole nother story in itself. That was a wonderful tour and pretty exciting. But anyway, so I circled again, and then the 3 different pictures, they were quick in changing position, and it said high PF, Pink Floyd, RMS. And they did that, and maybe I circled twice. Of course, a circle in a blimp takes a little while. Yeah, right. You know, an airplane's 2 minutes, it might be 10 minutes in a blimp. When I was learning, one night in Ellington Air Base, some bar right outside the base, the Outback Tavern, I think they called it. It's where all the NASA guys go, and we were there partying with a bunch of astronauts and space shuttle. They were shuttle pilots is what they were. They've allowed me into the contrast. Yeah. And we're sitting around and we're going like, we're asking them, of course we've taken them flying in the blimp and got to be friends, and the question came up, how many blimp pilots are there? And we asked them, how many shuttle pilots are there? And they're counting, and they're on their 3rd hand, and they're still going, and we're counting, and we're still on our 1st hand. So based on the number of hands used in that calculation, and there were a lot more shuttle pilots than there were blimp pilots. That was back in '86 or '87. And that number has grown, so now you can use your toes. And for example, it was a regular run from Ocean City early in the morning, best time to fly, come up to Chestertown, land at Gill Airport, and I take the door off the airplane, which popped off very quickly, and tied the dog to the door on the grass at the airport and said, stay, lifted the big bundle of laundry from behind the rear seat out and put it behind me, and fly out over the farm and buzz my parents. And when Mom came out in the front yard, I circled around and threw that thing out. And come back in a day or two in the evening when it was time for dinner, and they meet me in Chestertown, and Mom would deliver the nice folded laundry, and I get a free meal out of it and go back to Ocean City. And this went on quite a few months, and finally Dad said, enough of this, we're going to put the airstrip back in the farm and you can come home and do your own laundry.